Very good morning to you on this 20th day of August. If you've reached us, then you are on the fifth connection, where we, every episode, are talking through the storyline of the scriptures. We have a script. We need to familiarize ourselves with that script in order to be oriented in the reality in which we find ourselves. It's very interesting when you speak to most people. They will always tell you the scriptures is an answer book. Now, that's only minusculely correct, because answers to what? Rather, to view the scriptures as the instrument that the Spirit uses to orient us. What does it mean to be oriented? Well, the scriptures affords us movement inside of our reality in a non-drifting kind of way. So we're not floating along aimlessly, but there's a balance between our vertical relationship with the transcendent, with God, and with our fellow human beings, which is the horizontal axis. So it's a balance. It's a ratioed balance. The word ratio means proportioned. And so a life that is balanced is moving in proportionality between the vertical and the horizontal. And one who walks in wisdom is one who walks with great balance. And that's the kind of person you can't peg them down. You can't put them in a hole. You cannot box them. It's very hard even to describe them, because they are what I would call water walkers. They do walk on water because they live their lives by faith, by continuity of contact in the source of all being. And the source of all being is God. And so this morning, let us dive back into the text. We are looking at chapter 2 of this unfolding story. It's a scene in which bridging the chasm of factional hostility is talked through. Because at one time or another, or many times across our lives, we will be involved in factional living, not fractional living, factional living, where things don't go well because our relationships go out of kilter. So factional hostility was what was really real in the early church, in the early days of the assembly, as men and women were becoming followers of the way. They then had to understand what the way was in relation to factional hostility resolution. How do you get with the program, if you will? How do you get into the stream of flowing with relationships? In a previous episode, we looked at verse number 14 of the storyline, and we discovered that Christ, the appointed one, is our peace, because peace is personified in a person. It's not manifested primarily in accords and agreements that we sign these days. On the planet, different nations go into accords with other nations. And these accords are what gives the cue for how the nations then need to proceed in a forward-leaning manner. Well, Jesus is our peace. The Ephesian believers needed to understand that. Peace is a person. And if you want peace, you need to embrace this person. Not 5 techniques, not 3 methods, but it is the embrace of a person. What has Jesus done? He is the personification of reintegration. Of what reintegrating of fragmented living looks like, because he has broken down, according to verse 14, broken down in his death, the dividing wall of hostility. What's the dividing wall? The cultural divide between Jew and non-Jew, between Yehuda and the Goyim. That's between the nation, the Hebrews, and the nations of the world. And by doing that, what did the appointed one do? Well, he then brought into being an alternative society called, we commonly call it church. It's this assembly that is unified around the person of Jesus Christ and follow him as the way. It's interesting. The first time, if I recall correctly, this descriptor of the way appears in Genesis 19. God there is talking to himself as we talk to ourselves in a soliloquy. He says, shall I reveal to Abram my plan? Will I play my hand? And the dialogue goes back and forth. And then God says, I'm going to show you my plan so that he will conduct his household to follow after him. In what way? In righteousness and in justice. You will follow the way of righteousness and justice. And that theme is such a rich theme that you can track across the Old Testament. So that by the time you meet this very strange, almost crazy character, this crazy character, if you will, is John the Baptist. He rocks up on the scene in the desert. He's wearing camel skin and he's eating locusts. What a diet and a fashion statement this man makes. And what is the cry on his lips? Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Note again, the way of the Lord. And this is an idea you can track right through the New Testament, because living under the guiding hand of God is about a way of living. It's not a prescription that you are following. It's not a creed or a confession or even a statement of faith. It is a way of conducting your life. We talk so much about peace these days, and I think back to my own roots within a denominational situation where even up till today, there is division between what we commonly call Church 1, Church 2, and Church 3. Right? And the descriptor, Church 1, Church 2, and Church 3, was a description given to avoid the racial classification that we are given to in South Africa, because even in democracy, we still have these strains of describing peoples and people groups as red, yellow, black, and white. Racial classification. Well, it's no small thing that the church has been caught up in this, and even though we are 30 years into democracy, we still struggle to unify those three entities: the red church, the green church, and the blue church. I'm just messing with it a bit because it is such a shame. It is such an indictment on the people of God. And we are very quick to blame our roots. Yes, but the missionaries started amongst the colored people. And then they went into the black communities. And then they went into the Indian communities. Thus, Church 1, Church 2, and Church 3. Now, that kind of thing may make your skin crawl. Because the last time I checked, God is drawing into his family all the colors of the rainbow. And God is in charge of salvation, and he is not consulting you, nor you, about who is drawing into the family and permitting entrance into the family of God. The dividing wall has been broken down, and it's a lot easier to talk about these unity issues than it is to activate them. But I think we are just totally wrong-headed in how we go at it, because we tend to go at it mainly creedally. And if you don't dot the I's and cross the T's the way I do, then you are an outsider. I want to suggest that as we move through the text, that you are going to see that by the time you get to chapter 4 of this story, that the way unity is fostered, the way it is engendered, the way it is encouraged and grown is very different than we think. We purely think it to be creedal. As long as you get the fundamentals right, then unity is an automatic thing that just flows. And we are finding more and more that this is not so. Now, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying fundamentals are not important. But there are some key fundamentals. And what if the fundamentals are only two? 1, 2. Yes, you heard me. 1, 2. Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, and he rose again according to the scriptures. There's number 1, and there's number 2. And the rest, we need to engage together in processes of getting to know. In other words, process knowing, procedural knowing, perspectival knowing, through participation together around the scriptures. That is how unity is fostered. Now, you need to hold your breath until we get to chapter 4, because that's what chapter 4 is about. How do you foster this spiritual unity in the physical environment in which you live? So hold your breath. That's going to take a while. But you already have the idea right here in verse 14. Peace is a person, not a statement of faith, not a creed, not a confession, not even a synod ruling. Verse 15. Christ broke down the dividing wall of hostility. How did he do that? Well, he did that by abolishing the law of commandments. What's the law of commandments? All 613 laws. Not just 10 commandments, 613. That's Moses Maimonides, my favorite rabbi, who was described as, since from Moses to Moses, there's not been one like Moses, because his name was Moses Maimonides, and he was considered one of the greatest rabbis who ever graced the Hebrew people. We're talking Hebrew culture now. And he counted 613, a conservative count of all the laws across the Old Testament. So the 10 Commandments have their explications or explanations in 603 case laws, as we would call it today. What did Jesus do? By dying on the cross, he abolished the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself. Notice, he creates in himself. This creation exists inside of him. Because in him, that is God, we live and move and have our being. And so he has created in himself what? Well, this new entity called the assembly. We call it church. Yet the word has great elasticity, because even Israel was called the assembly in the desert. And while we know that there are discontinuities between the two assemblies, there are also continuities. And two of the most widely known theological systems split along those two lines. The one that sees great continuity is called covenantalism. And the one that sees less continuity is called dispensationalism. And again, on this channel, we make every effort not to embrace isms, because isms are man-made. And we need to hold them. Listen to me now. Let's not toss out the baby with the bath. This, I didn't say bath water, I said with the bath. Because some of us are so reactionary, we toss out everything to the wind. We hold the isms with an open hand and are constantly willing and open to learn. Because sometimes we come across like our system has exhausted the biblical text. Well, Christ has created in himself one new man in place of two, thus making peace. That's how he made peace. He brought both Jew and Gentile into one body. And by doing away with law living, because that's what Christ did, he might create in his person a modality that is alive, a way of existence that bristles with vitality. The church. So making for the reintegration of what was fragmented. The peoples were fragmented. Jew and Gentile, there was a strong rift between the two. And now he's destroyed the dividing wall of hostility. What was the dividing wall? These 613 commandments and ordinances. Colossians talks about these ordinances and commands being nailed to the cross. And by so doing, Christ disarmed the unseen realm, the realm of hell and darkness, so that we don't stand in captivity to the unseen realm, to the spirit beings that are motivated and designed to do evil. And so this entity is a wonderful new thing that God has created. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about this novel idea within the way, because the way is about newness and freshness, not about staleness and oldness and things which are fragmented. How about understanding, coming to a growing understanding this morning that in Christ there is every potential and possibility of living life in a unified way, and a life where there is unity amongst peoples. This is a hard one to talk through because we really struggle, not only in our own country, but around the world on this issue. We talked about being left of center politically. Are you left of center? No, I'm not left of center. I'm right of center. I'm neither this side of the aisle nor that side of the aisle. And we have these interesting ways of describing ourselves within a political context. Left of center, right of center. If you're right of center, then you are more of a moderate conservative and all that means. So we're not going to go deeply into that now. But I want you to start to think through with me how the text is unfolding that this unity be experienced. Jew-Gentile unity. But more broadly than that, when it comes to application, how do we live together in harmony? Well, that's a hard one. That's a crucial one. And so as you think through that this morning, understand that Jesus is our peace. And if you want peace, you need him, because he is the one who brokered peace at Calvary. He disarmed the forces of hell and darkness and gave you and I a hope to live for. He gave us a creative alternative called church, which is an alternative society. But we need to describe and define that society the way the text does. It's an entity that reintegrates all of what is fragmented. As goes the family, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes the culture. As goes the culture, so goes the world. And so this morning, I want to close off with that idea. For he is our peace, who has made both into one. thus making peace. Do you know him as your peace this morning, or is your life going to pieces? Experience him. I trust that you would have a good day, and goodbye for now.